Hey Nail Techs, it's Jill Wright with the Nail Tech event of the Smokies. That is, if you want info, nailtechevent.com. And anyway, what I want to talk to you about today is we just held our first show this year since the pandemic started. Actually, it turned out to be the very first show in our entire beauty industry since the pandemic. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, they were kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? We thought all the shows were canceled, you know, because other things are canceled. And people have been commenting and asking. And I did a little, I was invited, actually, I was honored to do a live, Facebook Live yesterday with Susie Moskal from Career Nail Education. And we had technical difficulties with, I think it was on my end with the sound. People were like, you need to turn your microphone down. And I'm like, but I'm on my phone. I don't have a microphone. I don't know what that means. And anyway, later on I found out I had to go into my settings and go into Facebook app and then turn off the microphone for Facebook. So I'm not that tech savvy with that sort of thing because I don't normally do audio and whatnot. Learning, so something new. Anyway, that's what happened yesterday. So Susie was asking a lot of good questions and we were trying to communicate, but we did have difficulties and I am so sorry about that. I hope she'll invite me back at some point so we can actually do a Facebook Live together. Now that I think I know what was the problem and of the reverb. So anyway, moving on, what I was going to talk about was because, you know, we did do the show and the show went off flawlessly. We did not have any problems whatsoever. Everybody who was there chose to be there and they were so super happy. It was just nothing but smoothness and nail tech harmony. And nail techs were just starving for education and the companies were just excited about sharing their education with them and the products that they have and what was, you know, new. And it was just, it actually, you know, it turned out to be one of the top favorite shows of all time. And this was our 13th show, lucky number 13, woohoo. So anyway, you know, I was concerned, I was worried, and I had been following all sorts of different scientific data from virologists and epidemiologists outside of the United States, like Sweden, Great Britain, what have you. I didn't watch the daily news after, you know, at first when I started, I was like scared because nothing they had to say about anything was anything good. And at first, you know, it looked like all of us were going to die. This was a pandemic that's going to wipe out the entire population of the world, and people were naturally freaked out and scared. But then after a month or so and the shutdowns and whatnot, and yet, you know, you see life finds a way, life goes on. And so I'm like, wait a minute, why are we all still locked down if the masks are what's helping us? If the 6 feet distancing is what's helping us, why are certain businesses allowed to work? Because the whole United States economy and, you know, whatnot, there were still a good 60%, if not more, businesses that were open. Not our nail businesses, not in the beauty industry, but outside the beauty industry. Like, you think those packages that showed up at your door from Amazon just like had Amazon fairies delivering them? No, there were people who actually got up that morning, went into work, and had to work their shifts. And I'm not privy to how Amazon runs their business from behind the scenes on how they keep people safe, just like people who are making proclamations and declarations on how we shouldn't have held our show. They don't know the behind the scenes on what steps were taken to make our guests safe. For instance, the Gatlinburg, Tennessee Convention Center, it had closed for 2 months. They they were accredited with the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, GBAC, which is like the gold star in convention center and facilities of their size. It's their gold standard of cleanliness and whatnot. They had to go through accelerated training on disinfection techniques and the chemicals that they use and things that they do to clean their facilities, their bathrooms, and the surfaces of everything in the convention center. They had installed all touch-free devices in the bathrooms. That's quite a bit costly. To become certified is very costly. And they also had hand sanitizer stations everywhere installed on the walls throughout the whole convention center. So if you weren't involved with the behind the scenes convention center business, you would not know that they'd taken these steps in preparation of them opening. And so the GBAC accreditation, if I could say it right, that's recognized throughout their industry. They have it's like an independent evaluation of they come in, they independently evaluate the companies, what do you call them, convention centers that are accredited with the GBAC. So they make sure virus eradication and sanitation, disinfection, all proper things are being done to ensure guest safety. So you don't get to keep your accreditation if you don't meet those standards. And so anyway, that was what the convention center in Tennessee, where we were going to hold our show, was doing behind the scenes. The reason we couldn't reschedule was because when they closed for March and April and May, I think it was part of March, all of April and all of May, all of those trade shows on those months got pushed to the back of this year of 2020. So when I called the convention center and we had this discussion back in March when we first shut down here, I'm in Kentucky, convention center is next door in Tennessee. So I called them and they're like, there are no other openings the rest of this year. And they said the only way they could refund our or any other conventions payments to them was if the convention center was closed down to where they could not hold any shows. So obviously all those conventions that were disrupted through April, May, if they couldn't reschedule, they wound up, getting their monies back and refunding customers and what have you. We didn't have that option because there was no, there was no rescheduling date available this year. And so I'm holding my breath here as the event coordinator, hoping and praying that the convention center will open in time where we can actually get up and go and start doing this. And so anyway, as luck had it, they did reopen June 1st. And so there were prior conventions held there at the convention center. And I'm not, what I'm saying? It's like, if you're not the person that's running your business, then you don't know the behind the scenes things about somebody else's business. So like, I'm not publicly commenting on how anybody else runs their business because I'm not privy to their behind the scenes. And so I'm just making you all aware of there are a lot of behind the scenes things that go on that you don't know about. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. So Susie asked, though, she did ask, it was kind of confusing, she said, because they didn't understand why are some convention centers and some shows allowed to go on while others are not. I don't think it's so much as allowed. It could be, because your state could be shut down and that means all conventions shut down. That's an allowance, Tennessee reopened, like I said, June 1st. So they were allowed to proceed first at 50% capacity. Then after a couple of weeks, the governor of Tennessee, he said they were open at 100% capacity. That included restaurants, attractions, yada, yada. So anyway, that's why our show was able to go on, and that's why we were allowed to have it. And we took all precautions that we could possibly take for people's safety. I sent emails out to all ticket holders. It was on the website, it was on the Facebook pages, it was on the Nail Ticket event of the Smokies Eventbrite page where you sell tickets and whatnot. I kept everybody abreast of the COVID changes because the rules and things, it was changing day by day, and so I was keeping everybody up to date. And at first it was going to be masks optional. Some people, the data they've collected and have read suggests that masks really aren't doing much of anything, and then other people felt the news that they had collected and information they believed in that masks did. So it's a matter of, how would you say, not just perception, but the information that comes to you and when it comes to you and how it comes to you, because each person's different. You process info differently. And so your experiences are different than my experiences, and my experiences are different than the man down the hall's experiences. And, everybody's experiences are different. So we're not all going to be on the same page about this. But what we did, we also, those 4 questions we have to ask our guests, our as nail techs, beauty operators and whatnot, we have to ask our clients before they come in. Have you had a cough? Have you had a fever? Have you been around anybody in the last 14 days exhibiting those symptoms? Or are you living with anybody sick or quarantined? That is self-certifying, and they can lie or they can say the truth. And so that's when we let them in the shop. If they say no, they've not had any of that going on, then we're like, oh, okay, come on in, we'll do your nails or hair, whatever. Same thing went on with the show. I had a big sign put up, and it was mask optional, and this is what, and self-certify, and please do not enter the show floor if you have any of these symptoms and you are self-certifying that you do not. Well, the Friday before our show, the county that the convention center was in, they did a mandatory mask, face covering, as they called it, a mandatory face covering policy that anytime, starting that Friday before our Saturday, Sunday, Monday show at the convention center, if you were in a public building, you had to be wearing a face covering of some sort. Okay, that is a county mandate, ordinance, what have you. There were 13 exceptions to that ordinance. And I went over all 13 and asked questions with the convention center so I understood what was happening, because I didn't want to lead people incorrectly and down the wrong path. So one of the 13, it was number 5, it said you were exempt if you had a medical condition that a face covering would inhibit your breathing correctly, properly, and what have you. Well, there's these things called federal laws that you can't violate, and HIPAA is one of those, and the ADA is another. And so I lost sleep at night worrying about how am I going to do this, because if they're supposed to be wearing masks, but I see that some are not, I will violate their rights, their federal laws to medical privacy by confronting them and saying, why aren't you wearing your mask? And then they have to tell me, well, I've got a medical condition and blah, blah, blah. Well, if I press on and go, what is that medical condition? Well, I violated their federal rights to privacy for HIPAA violations, and I'm not going to get sued from a federal law, violating a federal law that takes precedence over a county ordinance. So I let the convention center know in advance that I nor my volunteer event team was going to be the mask police. It was their facility. It was up to their staff to police the mask situation, because they were the ones with the lawyer on retainer, not me. I'm just a nail tech with good organizational skills that's happening to be putting on a show, a nail show. And the convention center emailed me back, and they said they were not going to be confronting anybody if they saw them in the facility without any masks. And they didn't explain why, but I can assume that it was also because they did not want to violate anybody's federal rights to medical privacy, and they weren't going to risk getting sued either. So we put all that out there, emails, everybody, all the attendees knew before they showed up, this is the situation, The people who wanted to show up, they showed up. The people who didn't feel comfortable, they stayed home. So everybody had choices, and they got to live their lives the way they wanted to, which is how we should all get to live our lives, the way with freedom and autonomy, the way we want to live our lives, because people, you only get one life to live, and none of us are getting out of it alive. At some point, maybe somewhere down the road, some of my ancestors may be watching this video one day, long after I'm dead and gone, and they'll be like, dang, her haircut was wild, or God, that was so lame. Who knows what they'll be thinking, but they'll be thinking something, The viruses aren't meant to, they are not by structure of their own nature meant to wipe out the entire population, because they kill their hosts, and then therefore they would kill themselves. So it's not in the virus's nature to do that. Anyway, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical expert, but my opinion seems to be just as valid as everybody else's, since the medical experts have been wrong on so many things. I don't see where a whole lot of experts are experts. So that's why, I did my due diligence on researching outside of the daily news being force-fed to us with their in different political spins, either to left or right. There's always a spin being put on it. I went to actual scientific research papers, medical institutes, doctors, things like that were putting out new new updates, because what it was in the beginning when it first hit became, as we got more familiar and got learning and knowing how to work with it, it became evident that it's not as deadly as we at first were led to believe. The correct processes for protocols were then changed, so hospitals weren't vending people and people weren't dying in masses. And so there's just so much technical and medical stuff. And like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a nail tech running a convention, doing the best that I can possibly do for the nail techs. So anyway, each county's circumstances are different, you know, because Susie asked, why are some allowed to and others not? Well, your county or your city or your state or wherever you're at, your province, you may have very little virus activity. You know, you may have very little hospitalizations and few deaths, whereas another place somewhere else in the world has quite a large amount. You know, everybody's circumstances are different. So the fact the convention center was open meant we weren't getting a refund. I have a legal and financial obligation, since I signed that contract with my name, to hold the show if their convention center was open. So their convention center was open. Even if we only had 2 companies joining us, I had to hold the show. So that's where we were. And once the convention center opened, I was able to start promoting it and giving the info. Nail techs were better informed, and they were able to make their own decisions and give consent for their own selves to travel if they felt safe at traveling. If they didn't come. So anyway, that's how it went for the nail tech event of the Smokies this year. July 9th, 10th, 11th, and no, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th of 2020, held at the Gatlinburg, Tennessee Convention Center. And if you want more information on it, go to nailtechevent.com, and you can find us on Facebook at Nail Tech Event of the Smokies. And I will try to get more videos uploaded. I did several Facebook Lives, and everybody was having so much fun. And the companies, we had 16 pull out because of their situation on their end. You know, they have to do right for their company because they're the company owners, and I'm not privy to what's behind the scenes of running their company, so they felt it best to back out. But I had 22 more companies that felt it was best for their company to join us. So anyway, we had 22 companies there, all told, what was it, 327 or 29 attendees, which was down from the 550 we had last year. But again, it's considering what was going on this year, it's a miracle that we were even able to hold the show. So I hope that explains a little bit more of the behind the scenes and what was going on, because like the bigger shows, they're in bigger convention centers. Those convention centers are in other states. How their state is being run at that point in time of their show, I don't know. You know, I'm not privy to all that. Their rules and laws with the convention center that owns the convention center are different than the convention center of Tennessee, you know, that I was dealing with, you know, and in close contact with weekly, if not daily. Those show owners, like the big ones like Vegas and Orlando, we're talking millions of dollars at stake. And, you know, they have to do what's best, what they feel is best to navigate their company through these rocky times and survive, just like I had to do what was best for my little, you know, company. So anyway, that's the end of that. Peace out, nail techs, and we'll be back with another video at some point in time in the future.